and welcome to the Amplifying Scientific Innovation video podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sophia Onoye, founder and CEO of the Sophia Consulting Firm, a life science marketing and communications consultancy that was established in New York City with the goal of amplifying scientific innovation. The goal of this podcast is to showcase scientific innovation stemming from global life science companies through conversations with senior leaders who share their unique leadership journey, corporate vision, and industry outlook. My guest today is Dr. Mary Margaret Mimi Huizinga, MD, MPH, FACP, Head U.S. Oncology Medical at Novartis, leading the medical strategy and operations. Dr. Huizinga joined Novartis in August 2017 as the head of strategic data and digital, supporting the broad digital data and real-world evidence needs of U.S. oncology. Prior to joining Novartis, Dr. Huizinga was the Chief Health Information Officer at Premier Inc., ensuring that Premier's products and services met the evolving needs of U.S. healthcare systems and led Premier's Applied Science Division. Previously, she was the medical director for the Center of Health Promotion and Disease Management at Vanderbilt University, where she promoted population health and shared data strategies and was a leader in informatics. Dr. Huizinga has also worked as an associate at McKinsey & Company's Washington, D.C. office and as a faculty member at the Johns Hopkins University. Mimi is a board-certified internist, a fellow of the American College of Physicians, and a part-time assistant professor of medicine at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She holds a BS in biochemistry from Mississippi State University and both an MD and MPH master's degree in public health from Vanderbilt University School of Medicine. I was connected to Mimi through Michelle Baumann, Global Head External Affairs at Sandoz, who connected me with Weishman Hillard, who support public relations for Novartis. Moreover, I'm a huge fan of female nerds, especially those like Mimi who love data, digital, and health equity. Welcome to the show, Mimi.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It's so nice to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you here. So my first question for you is usually my favorite, which is, what is your definition of scientific innovation?
It's a good question because I'm definitely one of those people that defines innovation by the impact it has on the individual. It's exciting to talk about shiny new toys and bright things that might change in the future. But really, for me, innovation is defined by what impact that we can have for patients and how we can ensure that all patients are able to benefit from better care and better treatment.
I love the focus on impact. I don't think that you can have a master's degree in public health like we both do without thinking about patient impact, especially measurable health outcomes. So thank you for emphasizing that. Now,
so innovation can sometimes be really boring. It could be, how can we lower blood pressure by 5 to 10 points? And that can have a meaningful difference on the population.
Absolutely. My mother is hypertensive, so I can imagine that if there's a way that could happen, she'll be smiling from ear to ear. So thank you for sharing that example. Now, you've done quite a lot. I told you I just love your bio. It's very inspirational. But what would you consider to be your most significant professional or scientific accomplishment to date?
Do I have to pick just one?
Yeah. Oh, maybe two. Okay,
maybe two. Okay, so I'm going to choose two things from prior to Novartis. At Novartis, my job is wonderful, but I often act through others. So I get to work on our entire oncology portfolio through everyone. So I'm not as in the details anymore. So I think my two probably proudest professional areas of work. The first one was when I was at LifePoint Hospitals, which is a hospital system of rural hospitals, all in small towns, about 60 hospitals. We worked to improve the quality of care. So we did a lot of different things. I could give different numbers, but the thing I was most proud of is we reduced inpatient mortality by 45% in the first 9 months.
Wow.
That's a huge difference for patients to be able to be treated. We reduced readmissions. We reduced harm in the hospital from hospital-acquired infections. At the same time, we improved the retention of the nursing staff and other important members of the care team. So to me, that whole journey was really something I'm very proud of, and it changed me and changed how I think about healthcare. The second one that I would note is after the Affordable Care Act was passed, the CMS, the Center for Innovation at Medicare and Medicare Services, did a lot of work in thinking about new payment models. And one of the things I did when I was at Premier was I was one of the leaders. There were a few of us, but I was one of the leaders for a collaborative of around 400 hospitals that were part of integrated delivery networks that were striving to succeed in these new population models. And our systems had more than double the rate of success as people who weren't participating in our collaborative. And so my job in the collaborative was the data and the analytics, and then how do you take that and make new clinical programs? And so I really felt like I had a lot of impact, and it was about helping systems think differently around their care for patients.
I love the continuity in your response. I mean, 45% reduction in inpatient mortality, in-hospital mortality, that is remarkable. I don't know how you all did it, but I don't know, did you publish your study? Like, how did you share that with the public?
So we were part of the hospital engagement network. So we shared and demonstrated a lot through that. And then, it was about continuously improving. So we did not publish the results, although some of our results were written up. We partnered with Duke, and so they did publish some of our results and some of their work.
No, I think it's remarkable, especially in a rural setting. Obviously, the work that you did at the CMS is also just as impressive. But because of my background, if I remember correctly, you were born in Alabama. And
yes.
Yeah, and I was born in Nigeria. And so when I think about healthcare in medically underserved areas, to have that type of data is really very reassuring.
Yeah, the thing that I was most proud of, I didn't mention this, but in rural areas, as you could imagine, there might be only one physician who delivers. I know you're very passionate about maternal health as well. So only one physician may deliver babies in a given county, and that for that whole hospital system, one or two. And so you could imagine that they would often try to schedule inductions or deliveries. But we really made a big push. We wanted to have 0 babies delivered before 39 weeks. And so in some of our hospitals, upwards of a quarter of the babies were being delivered before 39 weeks. And that puts those infants at substantial risk, both for having complications around the time of delivery, but then also for the first couple of months of their life. And it was really changing everything about the culture and the acceptance of what did that mean, for the physician who had to come in and make those deliveries? It was really a big change, and it was amazing to see that they were willing to get on board with it and do some of those things. Wow. So it was a collective effort, but it makes a big difference for the mothers and for the babies.
Absolutely. I'm really blown away by it. So what are some unique challenges that female leaders face, in your opinion? And how does the life science industry compare to others from a diversity and inclusion perspective?
It's a great question, and it's hard. I've been often the only female, often the youngest in the room with a group of leaders. I've been experienced a lot of misogyny. I think people are surprised to hear that it still is alive and well. Even when I'm the expert and I'm the senior leader and an executive leading a particular initiative, I've been told, your job as the woman in the room is to take the notes. Don't speak up. You can talk after the men are finished talking, or you can add it to the email that you send around with the notes. People would like you a lot more if you smiled. People don't like it when you point out where they're incorrect with things. It's really amazing, some of the advice. And what I felt was hard, and what has changed earlier in my career, when I was in my early 30s, I would be assigned coaches that would help me interact in a more acceptable style for others. So it wasn't about how do I have the most impact or how do I bring my best self to work. It was coaching to help me be less intimidating, or to be to not come out with opinions directly, but to figure out ways to have them surface through other means other than talking about things in the meeting. And it really took me some time before I realized that some of this advice and coaching that I had received was not good. I mean, it was not about being a good leader. It was not about being a a productive team member. It was about how can you operate as a female in a male dominated discussion. I'm glad to see that we've moved on from that, and that new female leaders that are coming up hopefully won't have to go through some of this, because I had to unlearn some bad behaviors. It detracted from my ability to make impact and from my ability to support the teams. And you asked, how things are now. I mean, one of the things I'm most proud that Novartis has focused on is our diversity and inclusion. So if you look across Novartis leadership, I think you can see a lot of strong female leaders. It really is, and my manager, my boss, he does an amazing job supporting the female leaders on our team. His leadership team is more, I think it's 60% female now. And all of the key positions in terms of the franchise heads, I'm head of medical, the head of data and digital, they're all female. And so I think it's important that females are able to show their value and that we respect the diversity of opinion. And I think now what we're working on is, we did a great job with our gender diversity, but how do we do the same with race and ethnicity as well?
Oh, well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that especially when you are an educated female, you're told that you're intimidating. And the whole point of you being educated was so that you can have a point of view. So thank you for not stifling your voice. Thank you for, speaking up about the things that matter. And I think to the point—
Took a few years.
Well, it's not going to be an overnight process, right? But you're where you are today. And I feel like there's so much more that Mimi is going to achieve in the next decade or two, and or even 3, who knows, however long you want to go. So thank you for what you do and for the insights that you've shared. Obviously, for me, I'm happy to hear about the racial and ethnic diversity. I think that that's something that, whether it's internally from a diversity and inclusion perspective or externally as you think about clinical trial diversity, it's a conversation that we ought to get comfortable having about how we can include more ethnic minorities in the mix.
Absolutely.
So, great. So my next question for you is one that I'm personally quite curious about. What is your leadership mantra and how does it tie into your decision to join Novartis in 2017?
So, I thought a lot about this. It's evolved and changed over the years. Right now, I'm trying to be more authentic and vulnerable. So, and I want to empower my team. So my mantra is authenticity and vulnerability breeds empowerment.
And is that the reason why you joined Novartis? Because you believe that they could be a good place to have those qualities, they will appreciate it?
Yes, I do definitely believe I've been supported along my leadership journey, and actually the conversation around vulnerability, when you come through healthcare system, you aren't taught to be vulnerable. You're taught to be tough, and you no sign of weakness. You're not tired, no matter that you've been working for 36 hours. You can keep going. There's no allowance for weakness, especially as a female. You just feel like you can't show any of that. And so I definitely felt like I was trained not to show any weakness, but being open and being vulnerable and inviting others in, it helps with the speak up culture. So people are willing to speak up more when they recognize that we're all humans and we're not perfect. And I do think that Novartis has done an amazing job. I joined Novartis. Well, the first reason I joined Novartis is because when I went to visit, I was giving an education session and everyone was talking about patient impact. And I just loved that the patient was at the center of the discussion. Yeah. And then the next thing I was impressed by is the authentic leadership that people were striving to develop. It's obviously a journey, but I do feel that there's been a lot of investment in our culture and in making sure that our leaders are self-aware and that we're authentic and that we are open to vulnerability.
I love what you said around authenticity and vulnerability. I think that shows mastery of emotional intelligence, which in my opinion, in today's world with social media, etc., it's even more important to have a high degree of emotional intelligence than just to be intellectually proficient, so to speak. So I'm glad that you found a nice home at Novartis where your full skill sets are being leveraged. And I look forward to staying in touch with you just so I can see how that story evolves in the next decade or two.
I love it.
So my next question for you is one that we've been fortunate to discuss in a panel setting during the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. We know that a recent SWOG Cancer Research Network study demonstrated that less than 1 in 4 patients in pharmaceutical company sponsored trials are African-American cancer patients. Can you provide a top line overview of ongoing work at Novartis, especially as it relates to efforts to increase diversity in cancer clinical trials?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is that we have to have a multi-pronged approach. There's no one easy solution. There are short-term but clearly if we want to make a real difference, it requires some long-term thinking about the entire structure of how research is set up. And so some long-term things are, how are we thinking about developing and investing in different types? So to improve the diversity of our clinical researchers, we should be thinking about how we're investing, who we're giving opportunities to, and what types of opportunities do we create there. In the shorter term, some of the things that we talked about and that we've learned is speaking to the patient populations, understanding what some of the barriers are for patients. And so I kind of think about this in two different ways. If I short-term want to make a difference, I need to think about both what sites we're bringing in and help to develop. That might be even more midterm if some sites aren't ready to participate. How can we encourage those sites to be ready to participate in our clinical trials? And then within the current sites that we're working with, how can we help them improve diversity? So we have education through some videos to help our current sites. And we can also work with the patient groups within those disease areas, and then different ones that are dedicated to diversity and inclusion to understand the needs that patient might have. So we talked about one example that we used were some debit cards. Instead of patients getting reimbursed for traveling, we actually provided a mechanism for them to get cash because that's what they needed to pay their babysitter or to pay upfront for some of their travel needs. And then, and in addition to trying to work with new sites and to identify them, we're also trying to understand and encourage the research networks that we work with to also invest in those sites, because it doesn't necessarily have to be only Novartis working on this. I think, and we want all pharma companies and everyone in life sciences to take this on as something that we should all do together. So how can we work with networks and other groups that are trying to build out clinical research capabilities and give those sites an opportunity and a chance? So what are the right studies that we might be able to bring to them to help them learn how to do this and to help them be successful? So instead of viewing it as something that they have to prove to us, how can we work together in order for them to be successful?
I like the multi-pronged approach. And obviously, one of the things you emphasized was collaboration being key, not just within Novartis, but also as you think about partners like the National Minority Equality Forum, in addition to big pharma partners, right? We can do so much more together. I also like the active listening to patients. You cannot assume that you know what a patient's problems might be, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's physiological. So thank you all for paying attention to those things. I think it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, there's a long way to go, but I'm excited that, and I think in the past, everybody in Novartis really wants to do something, but we've had a lot of different efforts that were disparate across the company. So to me, what I think started to happen in 2020 and we'll see more of in 2021 is that we're having a more cohesive approach to our strategy, which with high-level executive sponsorship. So I think that will really start making a difference as well.
That's great. And speaking of 2021, how has COVID-19 changed the biotech industry, and how sustainable do you think some of the changes, especially with regard to increased collaborations between academia, nonprofits, and biopharmaceutical companies, how sustainable are some of these changes, in your opinion, of course?
Wow, there's so much there. I mean, on the first, I think that Novartis didn't have a vaccine, and we weren't heavily involved in some of in those efforts around COVID. But I did love seeing how the life sciences industry came together to support. And what could we do? How could our scientists in the discovery units work together? How could we help with clinical trials? How could we help with operations like manufacturing? I think that there was a real just breaking down of all walls and barriers and trying to, at the highest levels of the companies, figure out how we could work together. That was heartening to see. The second, just as we were working with our sites with clinical trials, the focus was we have patients on trial. We have to absolutely make sure they receive their treatments. They're depending on those. So what do we need to do in order to make that happen? And how can we do that safely? And that focus, it caused us to do a lot of things like remote monitoring, remote site initiation visits. I don't think we'll ever go back to having only in-person site initiation visits. The remote works really well. So I think there were some of those lessons. It also caused us to speed up some of the difficulties in getting access to do some of that remote monitoring. There's a lot of data sharing and data privacy issues that you have to work through in order to do that. And so the fact that we were able to jumpstart that really helped. And then the last area, both on the medical side as well on the commercial side, we were looking for ways to help patients care for themselves at home. And so we have this neat thing to do. One of a few of our compounds you need to measure and monitor QTC, so like an EKG. So now we have this our commercial team worked on this little solution that hooks to an iPhone that has a cardiology overread, but it's all remote. So you can use it's like a Band-Aid size, and you just put your thumbs on it and on your knee, and then you can get a reading for the QTC so that the oncologist and the patient can keep track of that. And that was just one example of ways that we looked at digital solutions that could help with some of the distant monitoring so that patients didn't necessarily have to go to lots of different physician offices.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you've said. I don't think there's no going back at this point. You can't.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, you can't take 5 steps forward and 2 steps backwards. And I think when it comes to being able to access underrepresented groups in clinical trials, the remote monitoring in particular is going to play a very important role. So,
I mean, we've talked about this before, but the Holy Grail has been decentralized clinical trials for a long time, but there's so many pieces of it that are difficult. And I think we got a long way, digital consent forms, things like that. I think that COVID really caused us to advance a lot more rapidly in several of those areas that will help.
Yeah, well, that's remarkable. And as I mentioned before, I love the fact that you're a data and digital nerd. Can you share some examples of emerging technologies that fascinate you, especially those technologies that can help to improve health equity and access? You sort of alluded to it a couple already, but just would like to hear any more insights that you could share.
Yes, I mean, so I kind of think about the areas that I get most passionate about. There's especially from a health equity standpoint, I really think that the things that help patients stay close to home and receive high quality care. So telemonitoring, telehealth services, I remember going years ago to somewhere where there was an interactive device that you could use, and it had a stethoscope that you put on, and the physician could actually hear your heart and your lungs. And I was like, that would be great to be able to give these boxes, but it was such a high cost, it really wasn't a feasible thing. So where are the places that we can go that would help individuals, particularly those with, say, like diabetes or high blood pressure or heart failure, be able to track and understand and quantify their self, and then share that information in a meaningful way with physicians. So there's a whole lot of technology there that I'm excited about. I'm excited about some of the technology and data and digital that will help us understand what the unmet needs are to clarify that, so that we can understand where to bring new innovations to patients, whether it's therapeutics or other types of solutions. I'm not a fan of using the idea of big data in healthcare. To me, healthcare is not big data. It's actually very small and personalized data. But if we wanted to succeed at the population, we need to understand how to succeed at a personalized level. And so I do get excited about some of the advances that we're starting to make in understanding the data and metadata. So I am a nerd, that will help us do and identify the unmet needs and drive innovation. And then the third area, there's a lot of, to me, we're starting to enter personalized medicine 3.0. We talked about 1.0 where you had one mutation that you were looking for, and then 2 where you were looking at a broader set of maybe even still just genomics and mutation for either a cancer or for another disease area. But as we start to look where we're going now, there's a whole new suite of omics and how we combine those and bring those together. I think, to me, this is where you start to see the two sides of one coin of population health and precision medicine. So if we want to have a sustainable healthcare system where we can continue to bring innovation, understanding which patients to target is really critical. And I'm excited about the new, whichever omics you want to talk about, genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, radiomics. And then, of course, there's always how we're doing the phenotyping to really understand other aspects of the patient life.
See, this is how powerful your response was, because I was going to ask you some key consideration factors for sustaining innovation, and you very carefully tied in the emerging technologies with how they could play a role in sustaining that innovation. So extremely well put. Now, my second to last question for you is, what concerns do you have about the future of the life science industry, especially as it relates to key issues such as the need for clinical trial diversity? Are you concerned or are you optimistic?
No, well, I'm optimistic. I mean, I think one concern that I have, it's on one hand, I'm so excited at the speed of innovation and how fast things are going. But what I worry about sometimes is that, do we give up on therapies too quickly? So if something hits, do we not develop something else? And, I happen to work at a company where we have a rich and deep pipeline. And so this is something I've been able, I guess it's a luxury to worry about this. But I do worry, do we not bring a particular compound forward that might have been better or might have been better for a subgroup of patients because, we get excited and focused on something else, or maybe even a competitor compound, we see them as taking over, they take over the lead in a space. Maybe we don't feel like there's enough room to fully develop another compound. So I don't know if it's my top concern that I was thinking about this week. I mean, probably on a weekly basis, my answer to this would change, but that's something I was thinking about earlier. We have a few disease areas where there's been no development for decades. And all of a sudden we have a rush of development, which is very exciting. But are we as an industry really selecting the compounds that are going to have the greatest impact for patients? And that's something I think that we have to work through together and really understand and temper our excitement and our enthusiasm for how we make some of these decisions.
No, you're absolutely right. I think the age for the Me Too drugs, in my opinion, it should be over already. I think that we should be forward thinking. And to your point, think about what diseases have we sort of left untreated. And in many ways, what patients have we left behind? And if we can be more pragmatic about that, I think the industry will be even more innovative than it currently is.
So I do agree that it's what patients we've left behind, but unmet needs to me could be, where there's not treatment opportunities or where the current treatment opportunities maybe are not ideal. So we had some data presented at ASH that I'm very excited about in CML. So it's chronic myeloid leukemia, and patients take therapy for a very long time. But, it's sometimes we call it the good cancer, but it's really not. It means something every day that these patients have to get up and take a drug that might cause fatigue or might cause other side effects. So is there a way that we could help those patients have a better experience of care? So unmet need to me can mean can mean many things. I mean, in diabetes, we would worry a lot about patients just stopping taking their medication. Same thing with high blood pressure. I think that there's a misperception that doesn't happen with cancer care. When somebody has cancer, they're definitely going to take their medicine, but that's not necessarily true. We still struggle. And so how can we help patients? I get really upset when people talk about patients aren't compliant or that they're not taking their therapy, because there's almost some reason why. So how can we make it better for them or easier for them in order to be able to treat their diseases?
Yeah, and I see digital technology is playing an important role in that, right? Making it easier for patients to communicate with their healthcare professionals and things of that nature. So I remain optimistic. Exactly, yes. Right? So there's so much, I mean, honestly, there's so much that we could get into, but I will save all of this for our next conversation. I just wanted to just leave the floor open to you for any final thoughts or commentary that you might have.
No, just thank you for what you're doing. I think it's very inspiring. You have such an interesting mix of areas that you want to talk about and you want to learn about and that you want to bring to the surface for others. So I love that I can come on here and talk about everything from clinical trials to data and digital, to how we're going to solve unmet needs is great.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'm a bit of a nerd like you are, and I got educated in different things from medicinal chemistry to public health to whatever else, biochemistry too. But I think what drives me ultimately is remembering where I came from, and the need to educate and to empower, and in so many ways to be the voice of the people that haven't quite learned how to articulate what their needs might be, what those unmet medical needs might be. And I'm grateful to people like yourself. I would not have a platform without your generous support. I'm absolutely looking forward to staying in touch, and hopefully we'll get you back on the show again soon.
Thank you very much. I'd love that.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.